Thank you for joining us on the RP Experience. I'm your host, Andrew Regenhardt, and today we have Leah Paige, one of our top producing agents locally. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, hey, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to be here.
We're pumped. So, all right, a little bit about Leah. Leah is a top producing agent here in Southwest Florida, began her real estate career in 2005. Before real estate, Leah has spent years in the Army, which helped build her with the skills needed to be a successful realtor. Leah studied interior design in college, but instead of getting into real estate, getting into real estate and design, Leah actually worked as a corporate recruiter. Later, Leah decided to move from Houston to Southwest Florida and give real estate a try. Her business is built off values, repeat clients, and referrals. So welcome. You have an extensive background, Leah, and a lot of experiences, which I think we could just sit here and I can just be quiet and you can talk for the rest of it because there's so much that you probably can talk about. But can you just let the listeners know a little bit about who you are leading up to today?
So what you said is true. I do have a lot of experience. I grew up, I was actually born in the Philippines. And I was a military brat. My stepdad was actually career Navy, spent 30 years in the Navy. And I grew up in a small town in Washington State called Oak Harbor.
Okay.
Shout out to my Oak Harbor friends.
Is that north?
And it's actually 2 hours north of Seattle.
Okay.
And
do you remember, I lived way south in Washington, down by Portland, but just across the board, Washougal, Camas, and Vancouver, Washington.
Well, Vancouver's up north.
Well, that's Vancouver, Canada. I was Vancouver, Washington.
Oh, yeah.
There's two of them, which is so confusing, everyone. Yeah, so I actually lived down there for about 3 years before I moved here.
Well, I'm actually glad to be out of Washington State because it was really cold and rainy. When I have to go back to visit, it's like, why am I here?
I agree. It's miserable there. Sorry, everyone from that.
We digress.
Yeah.
Growing up, my mother, very Asian background, full-blooded, and my father being American, it was really hard for me. Growing up, I have an older brother. In that culture, you're not really seen, girls aren't really seen. Mm-hmm. And so I was a pretty precocious child. Mm-hmm. I want to say I didn't have a lot of direction. I was pretty much a rebel. And but I always knew that I had some fire in me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I thought, okay, I'm going to be awesome too. I know my brother's awesome. I've heard it my whole life. But, I'm getting out of here and I'm going to figure out what I need to do to make that happen. And that's kind of how I started. It was something that was sort of ingrained in me just by virtue of my culture. And that's what I did. That's how I got started.
I love it. So when did you actually join the Army?
It's actually kind of a funny story. Can I go back a little bit?
Of course.
So I was an average student in high school.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I applied at were more language arts. I loved English. I loved writing. I loved speech. And those are
everything
the things
I can't do and hate.
I didn't like that.
I love it.
Science, right?
Yeah.
But I was an average student. Again, I was just really more about my friends and my social life. And so here we were at graduation, and I didn't have a scholarship for school. And my parents were like, if you're going to school, you're paying for it. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't have a direction about what I wanted to do. So in my town on the 4th of July, we always have this 4th of July parade, and I was hanging out with my friends after graduation, and we were walking by a recruiter's office, and I was like, you know what, let's go stop in there. I just want to check this out. I had no forethought, and I'm going to join the military one day. It was really on a whim.
No way.
It really was. And I did this. I signed up on delayed entry. So this was in July. My delayed entry start date was in September. And when you're 18 years old and you really don't realize the impact or the weight of the decisions you make at that time, or how final or serious they are, that didn't hit me until the recruiter called me right before I was supposed to meet him to go to get shipped off for forever.
Yeah.
And I had packed an overnight bag, basically a weekender with a Glamour magazine and a Cosmo. And I'm thinking I'm going to be back. My mental space was I'll be back next week. And he, even the recruiter was a little bit worried. He's like, is that all you're bringing with you? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be back. No worries. And we go to the reception station and I get shipped off to basic training. You know, it was really kind of it was a very eye-opening experience right away because, you know, people were yelling at you right away. And I was like,
Right.
oh my God, what have I done? These
Yeah.
people are so rude.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
I didn't talk to you like that. Why are you talking
can't
to me
talk
like
to me that way.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, you know, I started to pay attention very quickly. I thought, all right, let me just observe what's going on here. And that's when I started seeing, you know, there are really two types of people in this environment. There were, you know, the people who called the shots or the, you know, the leaders, and then there were the followers. And then there's the people, that subgroup that if you didn't really like straighten up, you were always in trouble. And, you know, that was really a bad situation. So I had enough in my mindset that I said, you know what, I'm not going to be average. I'm going to be this. And that's what I did. I mean, it was really that quick. That decision making was, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I'm kind of staying to the right of the line versus always being yelled at, because that just didn't feel like fun at the time.
Wow. So how long were you there then?
I spent 3 years in the military, and I mean,
Travel all around, see different places, or where were you based?
I was based in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which was truly the armpit of the world. I was at a Persian missile unit battery. Back then, this is the 1980s, not a lot of women out there. You're in the middle of, you know, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't, it was sort of an interesting time for me. So
Right. So what do you think, what skills did you learn that you can attribute and kind of point back to the Army that you now still are able to like utilize and fall back on?
So, you know, that springboard led me to everything that I do. I mean, you know, my mindset when I went in, it was just not really, I didn't have structure. But the military, it teaches you leadership by example, right? Your work ethic and your integrity really are the basis for everything that you do. And in order to excel and in order to succeed in the military, I mean, you have to go above and beyond. I mean, everybody's there supporting each other. So you have this very collaborative environment. You know, it's every person helping each other, you know, even more so now, the military now, you know, you're looking to the person on the right and the left, and that could be a life-changing or a life-saving experience. You know that. Back then, it was, you know, you are a young kid like I was, and, you know, you're being put in positions where you have to communicate or lead people from a very diverse, you know, background, skill sets, you know, and to learn those skills, it was pretty daunting, but it carried me because the things that I learned back then, in order for me to just live day to day, I was scared all the time.
Right.
You know, you're waking up every day and you just want to make sure you're doing everything you can to do your job right. I just, you know, I apply that to everything that I do. You know, when I'm looking at people or when I'm speaking with people or I'm meeting people, you already can tell. You already know right away if somebody's got some good character behind them, or you got that sixth sense where,
Yep. Well, it's because you were around so many. I mean, you saw so many people, right? Like you learned through experience of like dealing with leading, understanding who's to your right and your left, all that kind of stuff.
I gravitated toward people who were successful right away. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be around people like that. And people, that's how I've lived my life. I mean, I'm around people who are positive, who are going places, who are successful. I'm constantly learning from people like that. And, you know, I think that, you know, it really helped me make some really great decisions, considering how I started in my life, you know. So, and I have this fearlessness about me. Like, I know I can do whatever I put my mind to because that's what I learned in the military.
So critical. I love it. So when you moved to Florida, right, from Houston, why real estate? Did you jump right
Into real estate from the military?
No, from when you moved to Florida, like when you got here.
No. So when I moved here, I followed a man. You come to Florida for sunshine or somebody. I met my husband, and so I moved here. And, you know, my thought was when I moved here, I was going to continue to recruit. I could do
Because you're still into corporate recruiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And at the time, the only jobs I was being offered were 100% travel. And at that point, I was like, you know, I'm in my early 30s. It's time for sort of the next phase. I wanted to be able to settle down, and life on the road was starting to get old for me. So I thought, okay, there's got to be something different that I can do. And that would happen to coincide with my husband. He was a firefighter. He's retired now, but he had started a side business where it was manufacturing, building custom gates and railings. And the clientele was primarily, we worked with a premier interior design firm here in town. And through that exposure, we actually built custom railings and gate pieces for some pretty big builders here in town in some gorgeous communities. I mean, we were building gates and iron pieces in Gray Oaks, in the estuary, in Port Royal, in Mediterra. And that really exposed me to some really beautiful homes. And I thought, wow, you know, that was kind of, it restarted my love of architecture and design and being involved with that. So it was just an easy.
Yeah. So your background was interior design, but your corporate recruiting, what was it in?
Information technology.
Information. Okay. Yeah. So you saw that and then you missed it. Obviously, seeing these beautiful homes, you're in them, you're seeing it. I mean, it's not the same, right? It's not selling homes, but it's in the same realm.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of interesting. I fell into recruiting. I was actually working full time and going to school full time. After I got out of the military, I got into school through the GI Bill. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I wanted to do. I studied interior design, and I was in an elevator in a building in downtown Houston at my job. I'm a case analyst for federal probation and parole, and I met this guy. He looked like Santa Claus. He was in the elevator, and I just started talking with him, and he was like, you know, you really need to be in a recruiter. You know, you have this really great personality, and have you ever thought about commission sales? And I was like, yeah, no, I have a job, and you know, I have a salary I can count on. I would never do that. And I mean, he got me thinking. So I took that leap of faith, and you know, I learned trial by fire again. He sat down with a phone book, and he was like, you start dialing, you know, numbers just to practice. And there was a lot of rejection, but I learned that commission sales is really nice. You know? If you have ability,
when it works.
Well, if you have ability and you have a teachable spirit,
right,
you can learn anything, you know, and if you do it well, you can do really well, right? And so I've never really missed a salary. In fact, I think about my life, had I just continued to maintain that, you know, the paycheck twice a month, and I go, wow, what a blessing that was. Right?
Yeah.
So now that fast forwarded to, you know, my exposure, because I was in school for that, and now I'm in Naples, and I'm in these beautiful homes, and real estate at the time was super, super, super hot. And I think everybody was basically in real estate, and my feeling was you just had to wake up in the morning, and if you were breathing, you were making a lot of money in real estate. I mean, now I know differently, but back then I thought, wow, I could do that, you know? And that's how I really got started. I told my husband in 2003, hey, I'm going to get my license. He's like, you don't want to do that. And nobody makes any money in that. And so I kind of gutted it out and did, you know, I sort of supported him with this business for, you know, that 2 more years. And I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to do this. So I did it. And then the market tanked in 2006. And I was like, oh,
dang it. Bad timing.
Missed that. So that's how
it's okay. We just had another great couple of years, right? So you didn't miss
right?
that one.
I know, right?
You timed that one good.
Yes, I did.
I love it. Well, you obviously recently have gone through some health stuff, right? And that was starting in probably, I would say, obviously, you know, your judgment there, but your biggest obstacle, right, ever. And that happened in 2021. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was rough. That was rough. I still have a lot of emotion behind that. But I was sick for 2 years before I got diagnosed with lupus, and that was in May 27th, 2021. But I was sick for 2 years, and I kept going to the doctor, going, you know, I'm not well. Why are you sick? No, I'm not sick. I just don't feel well. And every time I'd go through this battery of tests, they couldn't find anything. And so finally, after about a year and a half, I thought, well, maybe it's in my head. Maybe I'm just not getting enough rest, and maybe I'm being a baby. And I would just power through it. I would never take the time off. I would just power through it and continue working, because you have a responsibility and an obligation to your customer.
Yeah.
Right. And emotionally, mentally, physically, I was breaking down behind the scenes, and I just it wasn't clicking in my head going, you need to stop and take care of yourself. Right. And then finally in April of 2021, I said, you know what? You got to find it, because I know something's wrong. I had just finished another season. I was on my last leg, and then, you know, we went through every single test, and she came back and said it was lupus SLE, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, we have an answer, we have a thing,
something, which is better than I don't know.
And I was like, well, how do you get rid of it? You can't get rid of it. You have it for like ever. And I thought that was really final for me. And I thought, wow, well, how do I get this? And that's what killed me. It was that, you know, stress is a manifester of this. They don't really know how you get these autoimmunes, but, you know, a weakened immune system, a lot of it is attributed to stress and how you take care of your body. And as somebody who had always been somebody who was into working out and eating well and, you know,
taking care of your body,
taking care of myself, I was like, how could I get to this place?
Right. Yeah. It's not like you're, you know, overweight and obese and different things, and you're eating junky food, and like it's like.
No, I mean, I was a really active person. I mean, the things that I did for fun always involved death waivers. You know, I was that person. And then here I was just feeling really helpless, going, wow, okay, so I have this. I'm responsible for putting myself here, and now I got to dig myself out of the hole. And, you know, we're going through all this COVID stuff, and I ended up getting COVID. That was May 27th. In June, I had COVID. And because I basically don't have an immune system, I got COVID pneumonia for a month. And
oh my gosh.
And then they had me on all these medications, and I went from trim to like, I had gained all this weight, and then it got to mobility issues. By that summer, I couldn't use my hands. I couldn't walk very well. I mean, I could barely walk. Actually, it got really bad. So I ended up having to take a leave of absence because it was rough. Yeah,
it was affecting your day to day. It was affecting everything, all parts of, you know, your life, down to the most minute, like smallest little task. It's still affecting you.
Yeah, that awareness really hit me. So I had told my husband, you know, we got out of the COVID month, and then in July I said, you need to get me out of here. You need to get me away, because I'm literally on the verge of having this breakdown. I gotta figure out how to heal myself. And so we took a month off, and we rented an Airstream, and we went camping for a month. And a week into our camping trip, we were sitting there having coffee in the morning, and we were talking about hobbies. And I was still in this mindset, I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna get better, and I'm gonna do it as naturally as possible. And we were talking about hobbies, and I wanted to get back into it, and I couldn't think of one thing that I did in my off time. That's how much I let my workload overpower everything. My work-life balance was work, 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 and no life to that balance. And I just started getting mad at myself, like, oh, you're dumb.
Yeah. You said all the adjectives, right?
How you do this?
Yeah.
And so I made that mental commitment. I was like, I will get out of this. I know what to do. So when we got back, we took month of September, October, I started Pilates, because at that time, and still a lot of mobility issues, a lot of pain. I had to do something that was really easy and friendly on my joints. I was trying to work on my hands and things. So got with it again, met these phenomenal group of women in my studio who were really supportive, non-judgmental. I could walk in there, or I could crawl in there, and they didn't. And successes to me were, I could do a 50-minute workout. I could do one sit-up. That's how bad it was. And I would walk out of there going, yes, I could do one, I could do two, I could, you know, and then it just started steamrolling from there. As I got stronger, I got off my medication. I haven't been on meds since July of last year.
That's amazing.
I haven't dropped any coffee cups. I still have 2 remaining of my set of 8. So I haven't killed all of them.
Right. You still got a couple. They mean more to you now.
They do. You know, I have no mobility issues.
Yeah, when you get to these lows, it's a reality check for you. Obviously, you now understand in a sense how bad it could get or how low that low is. Where and so, when a deal falls apart, you're like, oh, well, that's not that low, right? It's just a deal, right? Where the other one is obviously that other person that's stressful, they're like, oh, I'm losing a deal, but they don't have a reality of what a bad day is, what a low is.
I didn't feel sorry for myself. I was angry at myself.
I understand that.
I didn't feel like, oh, woe is me. I felt like, all right, you better, pull up your strap.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah.
We got to get this done. Again, that's a military thing. There's no defeat. Yeah. You just do what you have to do to survive and to live. And now my mindset has changed. I mean, I am so appreciative of where I've been over the last 2 years, because it really has helped me structure sort of and build my life. So I'm a lot more productive. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'm not working those crazy hours that I was working, but I am certainly a lot more productive. And I self-care is something is really important to me. I know my body now. I'm not ignoring it, saying, it's in your head. If my body is telling me something, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to step back. My hobby right now is I like to garden. Mm-hmm. I can completely unplug. I can take all this stuff that you sort of deal with in real estate. I compartmentalize that. I go do something for myself, starting a fresh slate. I can come back, and I'm not stressed like I was. You run around, and especially in the last 3 years, you talk to any real estate agent, the first thing they'll say is, "Oh my God, I'm so stressed." Mm-hmm. I don't have that anymore. I'm enjoying myself. If I'm seeing that I'm getting to that point, I just take a step back.
A reality check. It's just different perspective, because you experience such a low compared to other people. So you understand what that low actually means and feels, right? Compared to someone else that is stressed and their low is the deal falling through, when in reality that's, in the grand scheme of things, compared to you, not being able to walk or hold a coffee cup or anything like that, that's a low, right? And so when a deal falls apart for you, you're like, well, it could be way worse. Where when the deal falls through for them, like, it's the end of the world kind of to them. So just different perspectives.
When I was going through this, actually, I was at a store I was gearing up for my camping trip, and it was really kind of a profound thing for me, because I ran into 2 random people. Actually, one of them was one of my sales managers at Compass. I was talking to her, and she says, "You know what? I know you're going through this, but you need to give yourself some grace, because we're always harder on ourselves, right? You always expect yourself to perform, and I just never allowed myself that, And I was just like, I looked at her, and I was like, I give myself my grace, some grace. What does that mean? I'm chewing on this in my head." Mm-hmm. And then literally like a day later, I ran into a realtor colleague of mine at the store. And she's like, I can appreciate what you're going through, but I just want you to know you should give yourself some grace. She said it. It was like, and I was like, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
I'm listening. And I took that to heart. Like, I got to be kinder to myself.
Right.
And
that's what the Army does. Like, that's what the military, like, it is so, you're like so hard on yourself in so many ways. That's great, but you have to have that balance, right?
I am a perfectionist, almost to a fault. And with that comes a sense of, this, I don't know, maybe it's an overinflated sense of responsibility. Like, you want to make sure that it's like 1,000% when it's not necessary. Mm-hmm. Our business, it's very litigious. I take that very seriously. I look at these contracts, I study these contracts, and I obsess about, okay, where am I exposing risk to my clients? But that doesn't translate that you have to go move furniture and you got to do all these things that we get dragged into doing. Well, I never, that's a word I never learned, is no.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I can do that, and you don't really need to do all those things to be really good at your job,
Mm-hmm. Agreed on that. Well, Leah, unfortunately, we are wrapping up here on time. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on here, sharing your story, your experience, and how that's obviously led to such success in real estate, and obviously what you've gone through in the last couple of years. And huge congratulations, right? Obviously, it was internal that you defeated it, and you mental, and you talk about that, and it's just amazing. So huge congratulations, and thank you for coming on.
Well, I appreciate you recognizing, and I appreciate you giving me a platform to even talk about it, because I think, self-care is really important in our industry. We're not giving enough time to that. So I appreciate that.
Listen, to all those realtors out there, take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself.
Well, great. Well, as always, RP Experience is extremely thrilled to have you on here. We're here at Venture X in the podcast studio. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode. See you guys.